Now, the Blue Yeti is an excellent microphone, but unfortunately, when I used it for recording some stuff, I got quite a lot of vibration coming up from the floor, and the reviews for the shock mount have been pretty mixed. So what I'm going to try and do is to build my own shock mount for the Yeti. So the first thing we need to do is take it off its stand and secure a Jubilee clip. This one comes from a supplier for ducting, so it's larger than the usual, and it does fit rather nicely over the Yeti, and that's going to be what we use to secure our Yeti into the shock mount. If you can't find a large capacity a Jubilee clip like this, then you can use two small ones, open them up completely and then join them together to make it. And as you can see, it's the Yeti has a diameter of around about 75 centimeters, so you need quite a big Jubilee clip. Now the other thing we're going to need is something to support the shock mount, and I've used some ducting. This is 125mm, which you can see, and I've used a hacksaw just to cut an 8mm cylinder of ducting. Now we're going to need to find 4 opposite corners, and to do that we need to start off by finding the center of the circle. And from my old school geometry lessons, we know how to do that. First thing you need to do is draw any chord around the circle, doesn't matter where you are, and measure halfway. So this chord turns out to be 9 centimeters, so that's 4.5 centimeters, and from that point I'm just going to draw a perpendicular, and I'll just continue it because it's going to be useful to the sides, and I'm going to label those A and B. A second chord anywhere you like will give you the center, because if you find halfway along that chord and draw another perpendicular, that perpendicular will cross at the center. So there is our center of our circle. We've got 2 diametrically opposite points. If we use the right angle from that center point, we can find ourselves our 3rd and 4th points, which we can label C and D, and those 4 points then give us the 4 corners of a square that can be incised into the circle. Now if I place my the outer of my shock mount onto there, I can mark those points onto the outside like so. So I've got my 4 points, and then I'm going to use a tri-square just to draw lines up through there. There are going to be 4 of them, and of course they're going to be 90 degrees apart, and these are going to be used to support a very important part of our shock mount, the metal supports for the elastic. And those metal supports from the elastic are going to be cut from an old piece of coat hanger. We want the coat hanger to sit nicely in it, so what I'm going to do before I do that is I'm going to take a triangular needle file, and I'm just going to try and score into here just a nice little notch that my supports will sit in. It doesn't need to be deep, I don't think, but it just needs to be there. a little something. It's a bit tricky, and be careful with the point of a needle file. They're not called needle files for nothing, I guess. You don't do something nasty. That, by the way, is rust, not blood. Okay, so I've inscribed just a little notch along each of them. This has proved more tricky than I thought, I have to say, partly I think because this is a little bit softer, a little bit less rigid than maybe it would be ideal, and partly because it's just tricky to do. I don't think these need to be deep. They're just going to hold clips in place. Now I'm going to make the clips out of this. It's an old wire coat hanger, and what we'll do is we'll make the clips just a little bit longer than the 8 centimeters here. I'm going to go for, I think, for 12 centimeter lengths. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut a 12 centimeter length of coat hanger using a pair of cutters. So there's one cut, and let's just find 12 centimeters. Gripping washing, there we go. So let's just find out what that is in old money. Yeah, it's just under 5 inches. So that's going to sit there, and obviously the bands are going to loop over it, and I'm going to use just a simple pair of pliers here to just create that loop. So there's one end there, and we'll just do the same at the other end. I think what I'd quite like to do is bend that bit over a bit more if I can. There we go, holding it in 2 hands. So that's going to sit like that. We're going to clip that on with cable ties in just a moment. But the first thing I'm going to do is make 3 more of these, which again I doubt will be gripping viewing. Now you can see that even with my limited skills, with a bit of care, I've been able to produce 4 almost identical, roughly similar anyway, little loops there. Each one will sit like that and hold our elastic. Just take another flatter needle file and just take off any rough edges there, partly because one likes to do things nicely and not avoid any risk of injury, and partly because those elastics I'm going to stick over them, if they snag on here, I guess it could damage the elastic and cause it to perish that bit faster. Now the next thing I'm going to do is fix them to here, and to do that I'm going to use these pretty standard little cable ties. What I'm going to do is drill 2 holes, and I'm going to just for neatness sake spread them evenly. I'm going to put them 1.5 centimeters in from each end, the top and the bottom. I'm just going to drill a hole either side of where I want my steel loop to sit. There we go, my marking for the holes. So as you see, that will sit there, just be a little bit supported by the little groove. I think maybe I'll deepen the grooves a little bit, and then I'll just thread these through. So what I'm going to do is take a hand drill, little power drill here, cordless drill, and drill those holes. So I hope you can see now I've tidied up the holes, and I've tidied up the workspace as well. Something I learned from my father. And what we're now going to do is pop that there. I'm going to slot one of these cable ties up through one side, out the other, like this. And I'm just going to make this high at the back here. It's a little bit fiddly. I'm not going to tighten it up quite yet because I want that loose, so that when they're both in I can then tighten it, tighten them both and get the positioning just as I want it. Draw both cable ties as tight as they'll go. It's not dead tight. Maybe I can get another notch on the ratchet. There we go. That's it, and that's pretty firm. And then I'll use a little pair of snips just to tidy that off. 1, 2, and there's the first one. So here you can see I've got all 4 neatly arranged around, ready to receive the bands. Now the bands I'm going to be using are these continuous hair bands. They're quite stretchy. I haven't really had a chance to experiment with exactly how I'm going to lay them out, but what I am going to do is to run them from inside of here out. Now, because I'm fond of my Blue Yeti microphones, an expensive piece of kit, I don't want to scratch it. So when I put that around there, I don't want it to scratch. So what I'm going to do, found some old bits of draught excluder strip. It's just a spongy strip with a self-adhesive back. You can use any kind of self-adhesive felt, or you could glue on some fabric, but what I'm going to do is just stick this around the inside of here. I'll make note of which bits move when I twist the worm drive here, so that obviously the whole thing doesn't ruck up, and that should allow me to make sure that when this clamps down hard on the microphone, the microphone doesn't get scratched. Nice and easy to do. It's not a tricky piece of work, like so. Now when that clamps down on the microphone, it'll be nice and snug. I'll probably need to open it up a bit more, just a bit, and now you can see it fits over snugly, so that'll fit on quite nicely. Now I'll open it just more because we're also going to have the bands in place as well. It's going to start by putting one band over there, going to pass it through here and pop it over. Actually, you know what, I'm going to try. I always like the look of them when they're all diagonally. Now I've no idea what sort of tension is going to be like on these yet, but I'm just going to experiment. I've got an idea what I want to do, so we'll see how it works out. So as you can see, I've come diagonally through from the bottom to the top of the adjacent one, and now I'm going to go from do the opposite diagonal, passing them through the clip, and I'm hoping, despite the tension, or perhaps because of the tension, it'll hold quite nicely. Now I'm going to do that for all the pairs. And that's it. 2 out of there, 2 out of there, 2 out of there, 2 out of there, 2, 2, 2. And so it's got that kind of, looks like a proper shock mount. The problem is, how are you going to fix the microphone in there? We're going to need a hole that will allow us to access that screw there, and I'm going to have to do this a bit by eye. Obviously this hole doesn't want to go towards the centre, it just wants to go a little bit kind of oblique, so it's going to take a little bit of care. We'll need to start it towards the centre so the drill gets some purchase, and then gradually, there we go. Well, let's find out how well I did with that. Yep, I can quite nicely get the screwdriver through it, take off the tape and use the needle file. So I might clean that up in post-production, as it were, not in front of the cameras. So let's use that hole to access the clip and widen up our Jubilee clip as wide as we can, and then try slipping our Yeti into it. And there it is, it's sitting in a shock mount. Now, of course, the shock mount's no good unless you can mount it to something. So the last part will be to make a connector to connect it, and for that I've got a microphone holder with a standard 5/8 inch thread. Now, as it happens, I don't have a microphone stand to stand it on. I have light stands. So what I've done is I've bought a 5/8 to 3/8 and a 3/8 to a quarter adapter. I've screwed the one into the other, and that will give me my nice lit adapter so that I can screw this onto a lighting stand. So not yet got a microphone stand. Now, how am I going to fix this to that? Well, I'm going to separate these two parts. This, by the way, cost a few pounds, a few dollars on a well-known internet web store. And what I'm going to do is, at the back, I'm going to fix it like that. Now, I'll need to drill through here, but you can see that this piece here, this piece of plastic, is a lot thicker than the plastic I've used. So I need to build that out. So what I've done, I've pre-cut a 3 centimetre, I think it is, strip, no, 2.5 centimetre, so that's 1 inch in old money, which will fit quite nicely. And I'm going to basically bolt this on. So to do that, I'm going to cut strips about yay long from here, which can sit inside my outer and be bolted on, and therefore make up the thickness. So take out the Yeti microphone and show you how we're going to do that. So what I'm going to do, I've measured this up to give myself plenty of space for bolting. I'm using a sturdy pair of scissors. So all I'm doing to clip that. Now I can see what the effect of 2 thicknesses is, and that's probably still too loose. So now 4 thicknesses. Actually, that's extremely snug. So we're going to go with 3 pieces added on to this one to make 4. I've marked the direction of where the Yeti is, and therefore which part I want the joint to go, and I'm going to basically mount these symmetrically in here, and I'm going to use just simple short bolts, 1 and 2 that I've got from a cheap hardware store, and these will bolt through. So what you can see is I've just put my 3 extra layers inside the tube. It'll be neater, I think, having them on the inside than on the outside, and it will also move the centre of gravity slightly in board rather than slightly outboard, which I think is right. This will sit quite nicely over there. We'll need to drill a big hole in a moment for that, but for the time being, I'll put the tape on there. In fact, I will put an extra strip of tape for that hole in a moment, and that tape will hold these in place but also provide me with a little bit of grip as I start to make the hole. So I'm just going to drill a hole through. Okay. There's one. I once heard a ex-military chap describe the most useful measuring device known to man as the Mark I eyeball. And so what we'll do, I think, just to make sure we get it absolutely right, is put this on. Actually, you know what, I'm just going to pop these screws through here. So while you're away, firstly discovered that I wasn't recording the last couple of bits, for which I apologise. There'll no doubt be some voiceover. I've made the hole the right size. I've cleaned it up a bit, cleaned up the burr with a craft knife. I'm just going to take some of the sticky away from the tape using a little bit of lighter fuel, a little bit of petrol. Again, we've got the retention hexagon there on one side, which I'm going to hide and have at the back. Slip that into place, put our thing through there like that, so it sits nicely and retained. Put this on this side here like so, screw that in like this. Nicely does it, and that will now sit quite nicely onto any 5/8 mount. As I say, I don't have a microphone stand, so instead of using a 5/8 mount, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch lighting stand. So I've got a couple of very cheap components you can buy on the web. In there, in the silver, is a steel 3/8 to 1/4 inch, and that screws into the 3/8 side of a 3/8 5/8. This is actually a very cheap one. I've got some better ones in steel. This is actually quite a soft metal, probably aluminium. But by fitting that in there, I can now screw this whole mount onto a lighting stand. That's great, but I want to use belt and braces as well. So in a moment I'll show you how I'm going to isolate the lighting stand from the floor. Okay, so here you can see the Yeti mounted onto a lighting stand in the shock mount, and it does have a fair amount of movement. Now, this is a lighting stand, so it's not as rigid as a mic stand, but I do want to show you one other thing that I've done. So we'll move this out of the way. So the lighting stand has three feet, and one of the things that I've got in where I work is wooden floors throughout. Someone walking in the room next door can make a big impact on the vibrations that are transmitted up through the stand. So what I've done is I've got a couple of cheap sponges. I bought 3 cheap sponges from local grocery store, cut out some old bit of plywood, but you could use thick cardboard, and stuck some felt on it. If I rest each of my feet onto this, there's a fair degree of vibration isolation, so I'm hoping that that will make up my complete shock mount kit.